Welcome, coach, to another episode of Build with the CEO. And this is a show where we help great coaches build real businesses. My name is Trevor. I am the resident CEO at Coach Catalyst, and I'm your host. Today, we are talking all about main offers. Now, through the month of May, we're talking about core offers. So, what is the thing that pays the bills inside of your business? That's our main offer. Last month, we talked about front end offers or what we call bridge offers. What's that shorter term, lighter weight thing that you can give people that are ready to jump into the main offer, the core offer? Now, there's three major things that I want you to get out of this episode. The first one is length, right? A lot of coaches just default to length, and we're going to talk about that. So I want you to be able to defend the length of your program after today's episode. The second thing that I want you to get out of today's episode is how to design the real architecture of phases and milestones inside of your program. And then finally, I want you to be able to price your offer based upon an outcome, right? And then I want you to also understand, you get a bonus one here. It's a quick little test to find out if you're underpriced. So I'm going to give you all of that in today's episode. We're going to walk through them one at a time. And by the end of the 20 minutes, the 25 minutes, you're going to be able to execute all of these in your business, which these make up the core of what your main offer is. So let's start with the thing that no one really has a good answer to, right? And I talk with coaches every single day and learn about their businesses and help consult on their businesses. And when I ask how long a program is or their main core program is, the most common answer I get is, probably could guess it in your head, 12 weeks. 12 weeks. Why? I ask. That's usually the next question is why? And I don't ever really get a good answer. Right. And then when I dig deeper, right, I get some honest answers around, well, I was following so-and-so and that's what they did. Right. We see this in pricing in the gym world all of the time, especially in like your boutique style fitness. Like, why are your prices the way they are? Well, I researched everyone and then I was just a little bit lower. Right. Not a good way to do pricing. Right. But so we're picking this length just arbitrarily on what someone else does. Right. That's what everyone does. Or maybe you did a cert. Right. And that's what the cert told you to do. Cool. Or maybe you ran it one time and that's just the length that you chose. And so that's what you've kept with. But like 12 weeks isn't really a length. It's kind of just a default. Right. And so what I want you to like take away from today is really questioning some of these quote unquote norms, right? And really thinking about the length of your program based upon the transformation that you are trying to help the client achieve, right? With real architecture, real pricing, right? And then ultimately to figure out if you're underpriced. Like that's what we're going to do today. And so like, let's get away from the 12 weeks. 12 weeks maybe makes sense, maybe, but I would argue that it probably doesn't. Now, if you don't really understand what the true transformation is for your client, that's where we need to start. And in previous episodes, I've given the 6-month question where you sit down with a prospect and you ask them, if we were to sit down here 6 months from now, what would need to happen in those 6 months in order for this to feel like knock it out of the park success, absolute home run? I just absolutely killed it over the last 6 months. What does that look like to you? Right. And if you do that with enough prospects, you're going to start to kind of triangulate what is this transformation? Like what is the client actually looking to achieve? Not what you're wanting them to achieve. What are they actually wanting to achieve? And if we're understanding our perfect client, if we're talking to the person that we want to serve, we are going to understand the root of the problem and we're going to understand exactly what success looks like to them. And then we can start to extrapolate that across a bunch of people. And that becomes our core offer. The mistake I see a lot of coaches make, the thing I talk through with a lot of coaches is we're wishy-washy on that perfect client. We're too afraid to really narrow it down and solve a very specific problem for a very specific person. And I'm going to give you an example here that just recently came across my desk. It was recently a client that I was talking to, and this reaffirmed some of these thoughts that I had in my head around the specificity. So this was a client dealing with an autoimmune disease, came out of nowhere, didn't get a ton of help from the traditional medical system. Everyone kind of said she was fine. She didn't feel fine. She kept digging, right? But what she started doing was consuming. She started consuming podcasts. She started consuming articles. She started following people. Because she was trying to solve a problem. She had a very, 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 very strong problem, right? And it was massively affecting her life. And she has spent thousands of dollars trying to solve this problem. Supplements. She bought an infrared sauna. And then if like a high-end infrared sauna, if you're familiar with those aren't cheap. We're talking 5,000 plus. She's done a number of different therapeutics. Like she is willing to open her purse to solve this problem. And as a coach, when you find that perfect client, you find that problem. I call it like the back pain problem, right? People with back pain go to a chiropractor. What's the back pain for your perfect client where they're willing to solve that problem and they're willing to spend to solve that problem? And if you truly have the solution, you can help people, right? Now price no longer becomes an objective, right? You can charge what you're worth, which allows you to build a business that is sustainable, which means that you're in this industry for the next 20 years. And I don't find you selling insurance or real estate because you couldn't make it as a coach. The world needs more coaches. We don't need more real estate agents and we don't need more insurance agents. We need more coaches that can build real businesses and have sustainability inside of this industry. That's what we're trying to do with Build with the CEO. That's what all of this is about, is helping give you the tools to be able to do this. Now, I can't execute it for you, but I can give you the roadmap, right? You got to drive the car. So 12 weeks, default, probably not the best idea, right? Becomes this kind of delivery default, right? And it all comes back to the transformation. So we have to start with the end in mind. What is the client's ultimate transformation? Realistically, based on your knowledge as a coach, how long would it take to get the client there? That's how we start figuring out our core program. And we don't even need to figure it out necessarily right away. If you were at our last summit, you maybe listened to a guy named Jared who runs an incredibly successful online business helping women, in short, kind of eliminate food noise, right? And so he's rebuilt his program a couple different times. And I believe he's on like month 6 of his program. And they keep adding another month as people are going through it because this first cohort or this first group of people are going through it and they're kind of building the program ahead of those people. So they don't really know how long the program is yet, but they know it's not just 6 months. Right. And we're going to get into some of the insecurities and things that happen. And I think why people default to 12 weeks here in a second. But just know that like 12 weeks appears to just be the default, right? And it's likely longer than that for the transformation. But it actually might actually be shorter too. So let's not just like say it has to be longer. It could very well be shorter. If you can get someone a result in less time, like we should, right? We can find other ways to support them after we get them that result. So don't feel like it always needs to be longer. Maybe a 6-week sprint is the honest offer. And that's cool. We can ride that for a long time because we can build some continuity on the back end, right? So the takeaway from this section is length is determined by the transformation. Okay? Length is determined by the transformation. 12 weeks is typically the default. 12 weeks could be it. That could be the transformation. But too many times we default to 12 weeks and that's where we stop. And then it ultimately limits our business, right? So length follows the transformation, not the calendar. Now, let's get into some typical like length zones that I think is a good place to start if you are a new coach, if you don't understand your client journey, you don't necessarily understand how long it's going to take, right? So here's some honest zones. I think 6 weeks is a very honest zone. We've run 6-week challenges at our gym since the beginning of time, before 6-week challenges ever got popular. And how we landed on 6 weeks was 4 weeks wasn't quite long enough in order to get someone the transformation. They would see some results, but not a ton. 8 weeks was a little bit of a grind for the client we were trying to attract. 6 weeks was like that sweet spot where someone could stay motivated through the whole thing, right? And we were using that as a bridge offer into our gym, which was our continuity offer, right? And so 6 weeks was the sweet spot for that particular offer. We got people great results. We then move them into our training. Then, as our business evolved, as the client that we served evolved, as our perfect client kind of transitioned, that has since moved into a 3-phase coaching program. And that 3-phase coaching program begins at 3 phases, but someone may repeat a phase. So there isn't a defined time on it. We have a defined result that we're going to get that client, but that may take 3 phases, that may take 4 phases, right? Typically for behavior change, lifestyle, where we're doing a lot of things and really kind of changing the trajectory of someone's life, which if you're listening to this, likely you're doing. We're longer. We're probably 6 to 12 months for a core program inside of that, right? And so this comes down to understanding what the result your perfect client is looking for and then backdating. And then we also have some ongoing programs that really just never end. For example, like our gym. Right? Our gym doesn't have an endpoint. We don't sell 12-month memberships. We don't do anything like that. It is month to month and it is ongoing, right? And so we have to just understand like who we're trying to serve, what we're trying to help them accomplish, right? And then what model we want to put in place, right? And I think most coaches kind of default to this 12 weeks because this fear of like too expensive, right? If I look at it over a year, right, and it's maybe $450 a month for a year, right now we're looking at a $5,000, $6,000 program. And so this is something that I had to overcome as a coach early on. When I first started coaching, like I didn't have any money, right? I was living with my parents. My clients had to purchase the equipment they were going to use to work with me. And we were using bands, those red and black and purple bands. My clients had to buy a band pack in order to work with me. And we were in a local community center on a basketball court, like tying bands to fences and stuff like that. And so we just got creative, right? We did with what we had. But I used a lot of my own insecurities around money because I didn't have much of it. And that played into the pricing. And I see this with coaches a lot because coaching isn't this like highly lucrative type of industry, right? Like financial services or something like that, right? There's not as much talk around money. Many times coaches don't come from a lot of money. And so they just have these kind of like subconscious underlying thoughts around it. And then that bleeds into our pricing. Okay. And so we think that, hey, a year is going to be too expensive. And so, but there's lots of ways to structure this, right? We can talk about it monthly. We can talk about it weekly. There's lots of ways to make it feel less expensive. And then the other thing is like, let's not let our own feelings and emotions around this thing influence others, right? Because when I was training, the people that I were training were like people midlife in their 50s who had done very well financially throughout their lives. And what they were paying me was like nothing compared to what they were making. And so it's really about perspective, and don't let your perspective influence kind of what you should be charging or putting your perspective on other people so that, thinking that they think the same way that you do. So hopefully that made sense, but there's a lot of kind of like underlying insecurities there. So I just want to make sure that like we're examining that stuff and why are we pricing it the way that we should be pricing it. Because as I got in the industry longer, I started to figure out, hey, that we're pricing this to run a business. We're not just pricing on, hey, this feels right. We're pricing it to run a business. So if we work backwards, we can figure this thing out, right? So once we know kind of the length of this thing, right? Let's say it's a 6-month program. Now we can start to look at the architecture. Right. And I've talked about this in the past. I've talked about things like naming, talked about things like phases. These are all part of the architecture. But most coaches, when I ask them to kind of tell me about their program, it becomes a feature set. So it becomes how many times a week are there workouts? Like it's 12 weeks long. We have weekly check-ins. I do one video call a week, or people get access to me inside of a community and things like that. And so those are features. They're not actually the architecture of the architecture on how you achieve a result. Right. So that is like the path that you take clients through. All of those features, all those things that you tell me, the 3 times a week, the calls, the community, yada, yada, yada. Those are all features that you use. That's part of your model, right? It's part of like your secret sauce. It's the tools you use in order to help the client achieve the result. Like if I could take those things away and have you use less tools to help that client achieve the result, that would probably be better, right? There's just less complexity. And so as a coach, you're the expert. So you have to figure out what are the tools that are necessary in order to help this person achieve a result. And you should be able to defend every tool. Just like in the gym, we have tools, we have kettlebells, we have barbells, we have dumbbells, we have suspension trainers, we have racks, we have sleds. These are all tools, right? But we use those tools in order to help the client get stronger, more powerful, more balanced, whatever those results that the client wants to achieve. We're putting the tools together in order to help that client achieve that result, right? And so it's the same thing with coaching, with lifestyle coaching, with nutrition coaching. You have these tools and you should be able to defend every tool on why you use it, why you use a kettlebell versus a dumbbell, right? All of these are helping the client achieve a result faster or with less effort. That's really what we're going for here. Okay. So real architecture starts to have phases. And I've talked about this before. And right now, we change my mind on things all the time, but right now I feel the best architecture for a longer program, a program that actually changes someone's life, has different phases to it. So we have a phase one, we have a phase two, we have phase three, four, five, and you can make those as short or as long as you want. But phases make sense with the human brain, right? They help the client make sense of this journey, right? Kind of like pit stops on a map or mile markers on a road, right? They give us an idea on where we're at and what's coming next rather than this 12-week program, right? It's 6 months. Each phase is 1 month long. We have 6 phases in the program and they all build on each other. And I'll just give you some examples from things in our current business. So we have a program called Project Orange. I blanked on it there for a second. Called Project is brand new. A new program called Project Orange. And phase one of Project Orange is what we call a reset. Okay. Phase two is what we call rebuild. Phase three is what we call refine. Right. And each phase has a very distinct goal on what we're trying to accomplish in that phase. So we're giving the client a clear roadmap on what they're doing, what's coming up next. And then we're able to repeat a phase if we didn't execute it the way that we needed to. Because, like, let's be honest, right? Everyone doesn't just follow this perfect path. Sometimes we need to redo something. Sometimes you got to repeat a grade, right? It happens. And that's okay because we're learning. And with those phases, it gives us these milestones, right? Gives us these milestones to be able to celebrate. This allows the client to recognize their own progress, right? And as a coach, it gives you kind of this natural rhythm for recommitting, helping the client recommit to the next phase, right? And then it also has the ability to have potentially some upsells, cross sells, or even like graduations. So there's opportunities for celebrations. And then we can build the check-ins into this architecture, but we're creating the path for this client, and it's clear where they're at on that journey because the journey may be longer. It may be 6 months long, right? Maybe 12 months long. And so we want to kind of give a name to each phase of that journey. Now your client's going to stay longer, your retention is going to be better because I understand what's coming up next. Right? I'm getting excited for the next phase. It feels new, it feels novel. We need a little bit of that quote unquote novelty to help kind of keep us excited, right? And then you're going to keep the client long enough to be able to help them achieve that transformation. And so it's really just breaking down that, what we decided is the length in the first part, right? Break that down into its different parts, give those parts some different names, right? Define each part on what our goal is in each part. What are our check-ins? What are our milestones? What are we trying to achieve? And you've got yourself a really solid program. Now let's give it an overarching name and we're good, right? We've really created a solid client journey that's going to help them get results. All right. So we start with the length. So remember, we're working backwards. Start with the overall length. Now let's break it down into its parts. Let's give it some names. And let's give the whole thing a name, right? Let's go figure out your P9, right? And then we execute, right? And so phases and milestones. That's what I want you to take away from that, phases and milestones. Now, next piece that we're going to move into here is pricing. And this is where everyone gets all like excited on pricing, trying to figure this out. In all honesty, there's no perfect rule to this. I have like a tool you can use to figure out if you're underpriced. But I think most coaches are kind of pricing based upon friction. They're trying to make it as easy to get into your program as possible. And so while I think there's some validity to that, I think we should look at our bridge offer, our front end offer, right? And think about pricing that around reducing friction. We want to get to a yes quick, right? Front end offer, we want to get to a yes quick. But for our main offer, it should be priced on an outcome, right? It should be priced on an outcome. And outcome is really priced mentally in a few different ways, right? How believable is that outcome? Meaning, do I have social proof? Have I done it with other people? Like the more belief prospect has that you can solve their problem, the more you can charge for it. How severe is that problem, right? Is it the back pain I can't get out of bed program? Or is it kind of like, my back's just kind of tight, right? The back pain where I can't get out of bed program is going to be more expensive, right? Believability. How severe is that problem? And severity, there's kind of like there's a sub one there around emotional. How emotional is this problem? Right? For the client that I talked about earlier with autoimmune, if I had an autoimmune program, I could, and like, here is the protocol we've used, here are all of the people that we've had success with, I could charge a lot, and that client would buy it because they are ready, the problem is severe, and they want to change it as quickly as possible. Okay. So those are a couple ways to start thinking about pricing, right? So now, how do we determine, right, if we're priced too low? And the easiest one is everyone saying yes, right? If your close rate with new clients for your main offer is really, really high, we're priced too low. We want about half, 50 to 60% of people saying yes, which means 40 to 50% of people are saying no, right? So that's the filter we want. Then it means, hey, we've pretty much matched what the market is valuing, right, our offer at. And there's a couple ways we can manipulate that. A little bit how we talk about it, how we propose it, how we connect the offer to their pain, and those kind of things where we can kind of ratchet that up. But if everyone is saying yes, you're underpriced. So if the yes is automatic, your price is too low. And then there's no one ever said that the next sales call that you have, you can't charge more. And then that becomes the new floor for anyone moving forward. Now, excuse me, I got a chia seed stuck in my throat. There we go. Now, no one says that you can't increase your price, right? I know a ton of coaches where we've had a conversation. I'm like, hey, man, just like next call that you do, just charge more. And then I follow up a couple weeks later. Yeah, I did a call and I charged more. And they said, yes, cool. Next call, you charge a little bit more, right? And so until people are saying no, right, that's one kind of filter, right? Another one is you're not ever getting price objections, right? Someone's not saying, hey, this is a little bit too expensive, right? That's another kind of signal that you're underpriced. Another one is a client is surprised when you tell them the price. Oh, I thought it was going to be more, right? You've probably had that before if you've done enough sales calls. Oh, I thought it was going to be more, which means, hey, you did a really good job in like demonstrating value and connecting that value to solving their problem and all of that, which is awesome. And that's an indicator that we probably need to charge a little bit more. And so when we get the price right, when we get our main offer, our core offer price right, it really does three jobs for us. The first one is it helps filter. It keeps price shoppers out of our world, right? Who weren't going to work out necessarily in the long run because they're just looking for the cheapest thing, which is cool. And there's a market for that. I just don't suggest you being in that market. The next one is price signals value, right? Of like just regular, I don't even think of a car, right? I'll use my what I drive for an example. So I drive a Volkswagen Atlas, right? Kind of a just regular third row SUV, right? And so a Volkswagen Atlas and a Porsche Cayenne both transport people from A to B, but one costs probably twice what the other one does, right? They're both vehicles, right? But someone looking at the two is going to look at the Porsche and see it as more valuable, right? Because of the price, right? Because of the price. And so pricing too low can create skepticism, right? Not necessarily enthusiasm. So it can be like, oh, is this really going to work? This sounds a little too cheap. And you've probably done it. You've seen things like maybe you're making a high end purchase and you're like, oh, that doesn't, like, you're not going for the cheapest thing. You're probably going for something maybe middle of the road because again, price signals value. And then the third thing that it does, and this is really for your clients, is it creates commitment. And I see this all the time when people offer stuff for free. is they offer something for free and then we get frustrated because people aren't executing on it. And it's because they have no skin in the game, no commitment. And so pricing can create commitment, or the right price can create a commitment that makes sure that the client shows up, right? And so we want the client to feel like, hey, I need to get my monies out of this. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do the work, because we know, right? If they show up and they do the work, they're going to get the results. So underpricing, underpricing is not being generous to the client. It's ultimately like under delivering, right? Because if you're not pricing it correctly, we can't build the business that we want, can't generate the revenue that we want, which then now there is a underlying friction between you and your business and your clients. And that's not a great place to serve from, right? But when you feel like the value that you're giving your clients is equal to the price that they're paying, now it's a great relationship. The business is working. You're feeling good about the business. Now you can get out there and serve. Okay. And so pricing is right away, it's a little bit of a guessing game. And if you're a brand new coach and just getting started, undervaluing is okay. Don't go out and charge kind of like as much as you can right from the beginning, because you haven't put in the reps. You haven't earned the right. And so, but if you are starting out, if you do have some test clients, charge something, because that's going to make sure that they have some skin in the game. Okay. When they have skin in the game, they're going to show up as a better client. You're going to show up as a better coach, and everyone is going to get better results. Okay. So hopefully that kind of brings things full circle for you. So we're coming up with the lengths, right? How long should a program be? You have the architecture. So how do I set up the architecture of a program to make sure it's effective? And then finally, how do I price based upon an outcome and not necessarily on like friction or making it easy as possible? And then finally, how do we know if we're underpriced? Okay. Next week, we're going to dig into the next layer of our core offer. We're going to be talking about groups. We're going to be talking about one-on-ones, cohorts, like what is the best way to deliver an incredible experience to our clients, right? And then we'll finish it up with one more episode inside of this core offer series. And then we got some really fun stuff coming down the pipe. Now, if you aren't part of Growth Catalyst, which is a sister product to Coach Catalyst. Actually, Growth Catalyst includes Coach Catalyst. We've got some really cool stuff happening with AI, some stuff we've done internally in our company to help make ourselves massively more efficient. And we're teaching that entire system to coaches. So we are starting it live with all of our Growth Catalyst coaches. And anyone that signs up for Growth Catalyst will get these skills that we've created so they can build their business brain, and they can pump out content, they can pump out ads, they can do all of this stuff with just a few prompts. It is pretty cool. So if you're interested in that, definitely shoot us a message. We'd love to tell you more about it and see if it's a good fit for you. So this is Build with the CEO. My name is Trevor. Now go out there, change some lives. We'll see you later. See you next week.